the South African government has provided updates on measures to curb corruption and improper procurement procedures in its electricity sector, especially within the struggling utility giant Eskom. The country's Minister of Electricity, Ramakgopa, gave the latest information at his media briefing held on Monday. Let's take a bit of that for you.
Our renewable energy assets are not fully exploited as a result of the constraints on the transmission side. The sovereign balance sheet is constrained. The significant erosion over a period of time of the Eskom balance sheet. So the Eskom balance sheet, the sovereign balance sheet is not sufficient to carry the kind of investments that are required in this space. What are those investments in terms of the transmission development plan as designed by the NTCSA? Will need to modernize and expand the transmission by about 14,000 kilometers. And then for us to be able to do this, we need about 440 billion rand. So the state is not in a position to provide that kind of support. So today we are introducing the independent transmission program. So what we have done on Friday, we issued a ministerial determination. What that the determination do, it identifies corridors, about 7 corridors in number. The total amount of kilometers we want to build is upwards of 1,000 kilometers. I'll give you the precise number. And then that needs to be funded from the private sector. So we're creating a dispensation that allows for private sector participation. The reforms that the President has spoken about are now coming into a concrete action. So we know that the NDP suggests that for us to be able to achieve the aspirational targets as articulated in the NDP, the country's economy needs to grow by 5% year on year for us to be able to achieve those aspirational targets. And we know that we are far off that target of 5.5%. And that answers the conundrum that is, explains rather the conundrum that is facing the country, that we don't have sufficient revenue to support the expenditure. The economy is not growing at the right scale. And part of the problem is the constraints on the electricity side. And then our view is that there's a need for us to ensure that we are able to accelerate and support transmission infrastructure development. Like I said, the transmission development plan does say that we need this 14,000 kilometers of new lines to be able to unlock the capacity, especially in the Cape provinces, the Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, Western Cape. That's where we have the most efficient and reliable renewable energy assets in the form of solar and wind. But we have exhausted all of the transmission that allows us to evacuate the electrons so that the economy can benefit from those assets. For as long as we don't do this capacity expansion, we'll not be able to realize that ambition. But also we're responding to the following question. If you are to go to the NDP, it suggests that the levels of investments in the South African economy, what we call gross fixed capital formation, should be 30% of GDP, and a third of that sits with the government, and 2/3 sits with private sector. So private sector should contribute investments of up to 20% of the country's GDP. So what we are announcing today goes a long way in enabling private sector participation in the transmission expansion and modernization, and in so doing gets us much, much closer to that target of 20% of GDP investment. The President announced that from the public sector over the medium term, we are going to invest 1 trillion rand. So we're bringing a new figure that is going to enable private sector, so that next year when we have this conversation around the budget, the economy will have grown to an extent that some of the challenges that are confronting Minister Godongwana don't arise, and in fact we have a much more smoother conversation and adoption of the budget. And then what you also are saying is that we need to ensure that there's a procurement and regulatory framework that is going to underpin this. So the ERA introduces a new dispensation in the electricity side. And then, like I said, what that ERA does is to say that the Minister of Electricity and Energy must then make a ministerial determination on the corridors that are going to be financed and are going to be candidates for private sector participation. And this is what we are doing now, so that we are able to allow an opportunity for developers and financial funders to work with government to ensure that we are able to achieve this kind of expansion. So what are some of the key highlights in our determination that we released on Friday? So of course this is pursuant to section 34(1)(b) of the ERA. So you know that the amendment has happened, so that determination is in terms of those provisions. So we're looking to ensure that there's about 400 kV of transmission power lines with associated transformer infrastructure. So we're going to build 400 kV. The capacity of the lines is 400 kilovolts, and of course there's going to be also transformers that are going to support that. What is the length of the transmission that we are announcing today? Is 1,164 kilometers of new transmission lines, and this, like I said, with associated transmission.